to Talk with Olena podcast for immigration practitioners in Canada. In today's episode, I would like to introduce you to Howard Brown. He's my guest today, and we talk about a lot of things in this episode. We talk a lot about how Howard manages to actually combine his RCIC career with a full-time job as RCIC. I met Howard during CAPEC NCIC 2024 in May, and Howard was presenting in Halifax during the conference. I really liked his approach to RCIC business, to RCIC career, and that's why I invited him here. So let's jump into the podcast and let's jump into this very interesting conversation. Welcome, Howard. Thank you so much for joining me for this podcast. I'm super excited to have you. I love your background. Now we know where you're located.
Right.
Here in Nova Scotia.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Yeah, sure. Well, we met briefly on in May on the CAPEC NCIC, and I really loved your presentation, and I really loved the idea actually of the presentation. So it was the last day, and in CAPEC they put 3 people on the panel, and I really liked the idea how they put the junior RCIC, so somebody with less experience, to talk about their struggles, their business, their experiences. Then they put somebody who kind of like midway, right? And that was Brooke. And then they put somebody who was like super experienced, 20 or more years of experience. Right. That was Phil. So so that was really cool. I really liked your presentation, and that's why I wanted to have you here. Let's talk about your story. When did you get licensed, and where do you work right now?
Okay, well, my story isn't linear. I tell everybody that when we speak that it's never a straight line to a lot of people's experiences. I started in the immigration space in around 2013. And at the time, I didn't know it was RCIC, but I worked with the Canadian migration section of the mission. And they were rolling out what we now have as the visa application centers. Now, in those days, we had direct contact with IRCC staff. So I knew all the program managers, the migration managers. We interacted because I was one of the persons that helped roll out the visa application center for a particular region. And I also interacted a lot with actual visa officers. Now, back then, it didn't seem like a big deal. But now that I'm practicing, I realize the value of having had that exposure, that experience. For example, I learned that the outland processing is different from inland processing. So if you have that experience as an RCIC, you are ahead of the game, because in terms of how they view documents, in terms of how they apply IRPA and IRPR, it's country specific. Versus a simple enough, I guess that's the wrong word, but versus an inland application. We had direct contact with immigration officers. So if there's an issue that came up, let's say somebody's passport, we recognize that it was fraudulent, then we would have to communicate that to the migration section. So I learned a lot about verifying documents, job offers, what to look for. Even before doing the RCIC program, I understood what to look for, and I understand what immigration officers look for back then. Now, this is a time when everything was paper, so all the applications were thick. We learned how to use the biometric system, so if anything happened, I know how to do biometrics. We had access to the GCMS system, so I knew how to upload documents. I see how it's uploaded. I understood the challenges when those barcodes weren't clear. So that was my experience. Fast forward, I started working with an RCIC here in Nova Scotia.
Sorry, but
Just-
that experience in visa application center, was it overseas?
Yes, overseas.
Okay, but then you physically you came back to Canada, right?
Yes, physically. Okay. So fast forward now, I'm in Canada, and I'm doing other things, but I still wanted to get involved in immigration. I primarily wanted to be in the foreign services, if you can believe that. So my background is really very expansive, but I also have a few lawyers in my family, so I thought maybe I should try the immigration side of things. And so I started working with an RCIC who incidentally had experience in the immigration office for the province of Nova Scotia. So not only was she an RCIC, but she was also our version of immigration officer provincially. So a lot of the things that she did, I adapted and developed. And then came COVID, and I had to pivot. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but I thought, I consulted with family, and the idea was, why not try doing, immigration consultation? So I did the program at Queen's. Completed that, and I didn't start my practice right away. What I did was I started working with an organization. We can talk more about that as we go along the way. So that's how I started, just the backdrop of things, and the knowledge that I had beforehand is what I bring into my own practice now.
So your work with RCIC, the one who was also previously had experience working for Nova Scotia IRCC, that was more along the lines of legal assistance work, or what did you do?
Yeah. So I was she called the position case manager.
Yeah.
So all the correspondence that came in through me. And she trained me on document collecting. We did the actual applications themselves. We went through a lot of the legal applications of some of the things that were, we did sponsorships, we did LMIAs, we did PMPs, visiting visas, the works.
Yes. And then you went to Queen's. So then when you were studying at Queen's University and you were about to, graduate, did you right away wanted to start your practice? Because I know that a lot of students in Queen's, they're super eager to just jump into business. Or did you have some hesitations?
Initially, I wanted to jump right into the business because I did have a business before. So it wasn't.
Oh, I didn't know that. What did you do?
Well, a different type of business. It wasn't immigration. Like I said, my background is very wide, right? I had a training business before where I trained hospitality workers, because hospitality was also something that I did for many years. So I thought about starting right away, and I completely understand the enthusiasm. But reality check hit me once I started doing the marketing analysis, and I realized I spoke to a few employers because my area of focus was going to be corporate immigration, right? So when I started talking to a few business people that I had networked with over a period, I got to realize that as a new licensee, it wasn't going to be $100,000 per year sort of thing, revenue generation. There's a trust deficit because you're new. There are a lot of things that you don't have a client base, you don't have marketing set up, you don't have any other means of generating revenue right away. So it's not, for some people, if they're gifted that way, they can start right away and it doesn't matter to them if they're not doing well. But for other people, because I also have a family, so for persons in my situation, I had to be risk averse in that sense.
Yes.
I had to be careful
Well, if you know that, if other people depend on your income, right, and other people like your family, as you said, depend on you, and you need to assess that like risk, and you need to find that balance for sure. Because by the end of the day, like everybody have their own situations. Like I, for example, I got licensed. We talked about this in 2016, and I jumped right away. I do have like a lot of kind of entrepreneurial mindset from my family, like my parents and all that stuff. But realistically, also I could afford doing that because I had my husband who was working full time, and was, I knew that financially there is that buffer, right? So I could essentially afford that. And if I had a month with, just kind of tying my ends and I didn't make any money, then that's fine. And if next month I did make money, then it's fine. But for your situation, that's not going to fly that way, right? So, like everybody, I just want to really kind of encourage everybody who is just starting their career that, you don't have to jump right away. You have to assess, right? Like, does it work for you financially?
Exactly. Yeah. You have to weigh the pros and the cons, and not because, and even if, as you said, in your situation, you have a lot of entrepreneurial experience or exposure, I think those persons tend to manage it better than somebody who's never done business before, who has no idea about marketing, who has no idea about business plan. They've never written a business plan before. Some persons just start without writing anything down. For some people it works, for some people it doesn't, and you don't really have to start right away. So you're correct. Yeah, for sure. So what was your decision then when you assessed that, okay, like you're probably not going to make $1 billion right away? What was your decision? My decision was to try and work for an organization. Luckily for me, they had just started. A lot of companies in Nova Scotia started their own immigration departments, and they needed RCICs to head those immigration departments. And I was lucky to I got 2 job offers. One was with a major law firm, and another one was with a healthcare organization that has over 5,000 employees. I decided to go with the healthcare organization that had over 5,000 employees because I thought my skill set would be expanded. Also, because it was a corporate office, I also thought of the networking opportunities that I would be exposed to. And I believe I made the right decision because I was a part of a lot of the programs that they started for missions overseas, trying to recruit healthcare workers in different sectors. And so I got to work with the Dubai IRCC, the Qatar IRCC, the Filipino IRCC, all the outbound Canadian embassies, India, so I got a full understanding and appreciation of how they looked for things, and so that helped build my confidence. In terms of networking, we had direct contact with different immigration officials. Another big thing for me wanting to do that is that my R number would be very well documented in the IRCC database, right? So when I'm doing my private or my private applications, they would already have my information in the system. Now, remember I started in 2013, and to access GCMS, my credentials would have had to be there as well. So I think in a grand scheme of things, I'm pretty well known in the IRCC system. But because a lot of the processes also depend on trust, it's good when you have a consultant or a lawyer that's submitting an application that you can confidently say they have a track record of being honest in terms of the information that they provide. So this is one of the big benefits I had, or I believe I attained from working in a large organization like that.
So which year? I just trying to understand timeline. Which year did you start in that healthcare organization?
2021.
2021. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, I bet right now when we're doing like all these healthcare draws, and you're happy that you have a lot of exposure to
I'm
healthcare.
like pig in mud, right? Because I completely understand the licensing requirements.
Yeah.
I understand the registration requirements. I understand if you're not in Canada, how it works, what the different what it is like to get police records from different countries, what that looks like. A lot of it, I don't think I would have got that experience just being on my own.
Yes, no, absolutely, you're absolutely right. So are you still working with that organization, or you're working with...
No, I'm now with another organization, the corporate office. This time it's a different industry. They have over 3,000 employees. And just to backtrack a bit, all these companies know that I have my private practice. So if you're going to work with an organization, just make sure that they have no issue with you having a private practice as well. What they will say to you is you can't compete. So if, for example, working in healthcare, I can't give their employees a service agreement because I'm processing their application, right? So that's a conflict of interest. Just want to put that out there.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. Yeah, absolutely. And I know that if you are working for a law firm, some employers, especially law firms, would not allow you to practice independently. And that's fine as well. It's a trade-off, right? For some people it works, for some people it doesn't. Some RCICs would decide to go working for a law firm first, and they would say, okay, I'm not going to start my private practice because I do want to put this 1 to 2 to 3 years of my life into just learning the environment, learning the processes, and then afterwards I would start my own practice. And that's sometimes how it works as well. Okay, so now you kind of briefly mentioned that you from the start wanted to focus on corporate sector in terms of your practice. So can you tell me like why that sector specifically, and what's the thinking behind it?
Well, the immigration space is pretty crowded. Everybody is doing family sponsorships, everybody's doing LMIAs, everybody's doing visiting visas. And I think the strength of immigration is fueled by the business community, right? So if you're doing business immigration, I think that's a great niche as well. But I'm coming from a corporate background, I wanted to get involved with employers who have challenges, especially in the Maritimes, with their workforce. So when I have a discussion with an employer, I ask them for their workforce strategy. What percentage of your workforce is foreign-based versus local? For challenging sectors like healthcare or construction or hospitality, there has to be a strategy. There's just not enough domestically skilled persons to fill vacancies. So I decided to move in that direction. It is slow. You have to be persistent. You have to be a part of a network. So if you don't have a network and you're going in, you'll probably never get somebody calling you back. You'll never get an email responded to. Nobody will meet with you, right? So it's not an easy market to get into. But once you're in that network, this employer is going to refer you to another employer who's going to refer you to another employer. And so your business becomes consistent in that you have the foundation, that you can now do maybe your provincial nomination or your family sponsorship or your LMIA or whatever it is. So that's where I'm focused on right now. I'm also looking at eventually branching out to the refugee section of things, to utilize my IRB portion of the license. It's still something I'm exploring. I haven't decided to go into it fully because there's so much fraud in there, and I'm not sure I want to be caught up into that sort of thing. But yeah, that's something I'm looking at.
Can I ask you, I know that you just started looking into that refugee portion of the thing, but can I ask you like a very stupid question? Because I literally don't understand how it works. I've never worked with anybody who does refugees. I've never, I don't know how that business works, because to me, that's a completely different business than what we're doing, right? And in terms of refugees, like, how do you, obviously you need to file refugee claims when the person is already in Canada. Most of the cases, they would just come here and visit for visas or, overstay or whatever the case is, right? And then most of the cases, like I'm Ukrainian, I know about Ukrainians, most of the cases, they don't have money to pay for services. Like it's just not happening. So how this can be a business viable model if somebody specializes on those refugee claims. I know that lawyers, they would get somehow paid from the government, like there is a system with that, but RCIC, I don't think they can do that. Like, do you know how that can work if the immigration company specializes in refugees?
Well, this is why it's still at the investigative stage. You are correct that some of the refugees do not have the means to afford representation.
Yeah, not all.
No, right. I'm going to say now that I find though that there is a percentage of those that are not fleeing conflict, for example. So they haven't just escaped and left everything behind. They would normally have a means, and they understand, because sometimes there's communication within that community that these are the things that you need to do, and so they're either sponsored or they already have the means by which to pursue representation, and a lot of them can. It just depends on your pricing model. Like I wouldn't be charging $50,000 for a refugee claim, right? But there is a way to generate revenue in that area, and as long as you do it properly and consistently, I wouldn't say I would want that to be the only model that I'm going to pursue, right? But it is possible. It is possible.
Yeah, it makes sense. Totally. I was just wondering because it's, with the Ukrainian war right now, I can really see like firsthand how things work. And you are right. And like a lot of times people do sell everything they had behind, and they are bringing money. Even they are refugees, but they are bringing money because they just sold their 2 apartments, in capital of Ukraine, and it's easily $200,000 or $300,000. But not like they're rich or anything, but because they are running from war or whatever the case is, that can be the case, right? So yeah, that can work. So now you mentioned that you're working for a company, but it's in a different sector. It's not healthcare, right?
Yes.
And you're still having your business, simultaneously. So tell me, is there a plan for you to transition eventually from being an employee? Okay. Do you have a timeline on that plan?
I would say in another 3 years is what I'm looking at. Because while I am building this knowledge base, I'm also building the client base. I'm also building the brand. Branding is very important. and the competition out there is not amongst RCICs, but the competition between regulated consultants and unregulated consultants is fierce. And I find that for whatever reason, people tend to want to believe the persons who are trained or who didn't study immigration more than they want to listen to somebody who studied. So branding is very important to generate that understanding that you are a company or a firm or an organization that can be trusted, because there's a big trust deficit out there. The biggest thing now is with LMIAs, right?
Yeah.
I try to stay away from having LMIAs as a part of my niche. I will do it if I deem it necessary for the employer, but because it is so embroiled in controversy and there is a certain expectation that you're going to be a part of the sinister money-making scheme, I tend to shy away from it, right? So I respect you if you do that a lot and that's part of your business, that's totally fine. But from my perspective, in order to transition into my full-time, branding is very important. So right now, those are the things that I'm driving. Also, a lot of automation. Now that AI has come in, I'm trying to see how I can integrate that into my practice. I haven't yet learned how to, but it's something that I want to do because I believe that is a way of the future. And I think something I said at the conference, that if the speed of change outside the organization is happening faster than what's happening inside your own organization, then you're going to be obsolete, right? So you have to keep maybe a step ahead or at the same pace of changes that are happening. So a lot of things are happening in that regard, and this is why I'm looking at a 3-year timeline to fully transition into my own thing.
Yes, it's really funny that you mentioned that, because I don't know if you saw it just yesterday. I saw Josh's post, Josh, immigration lawyer who is Visto.
Yes, Visto. Yes.
Yeah. And he just posted like literally what you just said, that like if you are integrating AI, and like he believes that companies in immigration space that are doing this are like one step ahead of everybody else in 3 to 6 months, or I think he said 6 to 12 months, that we will see really that change. Is that if you are really integrating technology and specifically AI in your business, that can really differentiate you from other businesses. Yeah. On another note, I just wanted to say, like I'm listening to you, and one thing that strikes me is that like very different from other immigration consultants, that you are so intentional about thinking through like which case types you are going to work with or you are working with, and what you want to do, because that is not often what I see in immigration consultants. Because usually, and it's not like it's wrong, but usually you get a license and you're like, I do it all. But then years go by, and that's fine because you need to try things, right? But then years go by, and like all of a sudden you're 5 years in the business and you're doing everything, starting with like visitor visa for a grandma, ending with a refugee in IRB. And it's not good for business to do it this way. It's just not good. You need to be intentional, because when you focus, well, first of all, your revenue would be focused, right? And you have that focus on like building those relationships, and whether it's in corporate immigration or if somebody wants to do like LMIAs or whatever it is, you're focused, right? And then you're building your brand that way as well. So I really I'm huge on that, like intentionality.
Yes.
How you said, and knowing what you want to do, but also knowing what you don't want to get into, like as you said, LMIAs. And I totally get that. Like for me, that was that thinking for years, that I'm not going to touch LMIAs because I don't want to even like get into that whole story. But then eventually, like now in the last several years, it's needed, like in order for people to score express entry points, they're asking their employers to do LMIAs, and employers are just like coming and like, look, I want to keep the employee, like, can you help me? And then for last, like, I think 3 years, we're doing like a lot of them, just because that's where immigration kind of moves into right now.
And don't get me wrong, if you have a good relationship with your employer or your business partner, I don't have a challenge with that.
Yeah.
I give examples of, I've had people approach me, I need to hire this person. What do I do? Okay, well, what do you want to think about LMIA? This is a process. And immediately they pivot to, well, how much can we make from the person? I'm like, no, it's well, sorry, the conversation is over, right? That's not something I participate in, right?
No.
So I guess it depends on the level as well. Low skill, low wage versus high wage, high skill versus low skill. It depends on the industry that you're doing the LMIA for. I tend to find that the higher skill and more the more advanced companies are straightforward, they're transparent, and therefore there's no issue right there. I'm just, with all the changes, I anticipate there are a lot of changes to come with a pending election. The government is doing a lot of shifting and changing, and what worked in 2020, 2021 is completely different now. So once that settles, I'll be able to see it for what it is and see how best I can, work there. I'm not ruling it out completely. I'm just saying that's not something I want to focus on, and it's not something my business would be known for. So if somebody comes to me and, for example, they want 50 truck drivers, maybe I can refer them out to somebody else, because it's truck drivers, food and restaurants are very sketchy right now, right?
Very sketchy. It's you're totally right, because, like, for example, I do LMIAs mostly, like, most of our clients are construction companies in Toronto, and those ones are not sketchy at all, because they are like actual construction companies that actually don't have anybody to hire, and they just need Exactly. And they, just yesterday I had the construction company saying, like, hey, like, can you do 4 carpenters? And I'm like, do you have foreign workers? They're like, no, we don't have anybody. We just need 4 carpenters, because we know that our business will need in the next 6 months 4 carpenters. So I'll work, like, HR is like, I'll work on, like, finding somebody. But, so those ones are very, very genuine. And that construction, I would say, like, it's one of the best industries to work with, like, LMIAs, just because it's easy in terms of the process. It's super easy. It's super straightforward. It's very genuine. There are no problems usually. So yeah, it really depends on the industry. So now going back to the question, like, I'm super interested about that transition. Like, how do you must have thought about it. Like, do you know what is the point when you're going to transition? What that depends on? Does it depend on, like, how much revenue your existing company already makes, and, like, that's the time that I'm gonna make the switch? That's how you measure it?
That's part of it. Once I see that the revenue outpaces or equalizes to what I'm earning company-wise, then I can say it's time to switch, because at that point, the volume would be too much for me to do both.
So that is my question, because I do, like, in terms of, I run the course, like Business Accelerator course, and we do have always, like, in every cohort, we have a portion of RCICs that doing both jobs, and their main objective is that to do that switch. But the problem is that when you are, like, basing it on that indicators that, okay, when my business is making, or outpacing what I'm making in my job, and you're, like, waiting for that, then my fear is that you're going to stretch out yourself too thin, because, like, managing the business that doing, like, 6-figure and managing a full-time job that you're earning it's 6-figure and doing both, like, that's super difficult,
Yeah. Let's say for now that is how I'm reasoning it. I love the job, both jobs that I had. I love them. I loved what I did, because it's a part of immigration. So I can't say when I get unhappy with my job, then I'm gonna quit.
Yeah.
I would say the financial aspect is just one part of the pyramid. I'm looking also at volume, as I said, because right now I'm part-time in my private practice, full-time in my main job. But once volume starts to blossom, then there is no way for me to handle both. I mean, I could hire people,
No,
but
I
then
don't
I
think
don't want to
that's,
do
yeah.
that. Right? That's not something I want to do right off the bat. I would probably only start hiring once, if I'm gonna level up, if I'm gonna have open an office in Alberta, or open an
Yeah.
office
Yeah.
in British Columbia, for example. Then that's when I start to hire. So volume, revenue, and also the market, because I'm big on looking at what's happening in the market. I scan the political atmosphere. I scan what's happening in immigration. One of the things I learned back in 2013, 2014 is that when you send an application to a local office, let's say you're applying for a visiting visa, the country conditions is going to play a factor in how they render their decision, right?
Yeah.
So yes, there is a law, and a lot of people are big on quoting IRPA and IRPA and IRPPR and telling the visa officer that you must. But the visa officers have discretionary authority. So if there is political turmoil in your country, for example, and all of a sudden you're sending in applications for visiting visas, chances are you're going to get a high level of refusal.
Yeah.
Now with Chinook and data analytics, a lot of those dynamics have changed. So whether or not you're in turmoil, sometimes the refusal are just going to be high for different factors. So I'm looking at, for example, I wouldn't want to venture out now, because there's a change, there's a possibility that there's going to be a change in government. And having experienced what the Conservatives did with immigration, I can anticipate that there are going to be possibly similar things that will change, that will make the landscape a little bit more difficult to navigate.
Yeah.
And so you have to be prepared for that. You have to be able to pivot very often. So there are a lot of things that also plays a part in it. So I'm not just focusing on the revenue,
Yes. No, that totally makes sense. Absolutely. And, I think another thing that I really liked what you said is that you actually love your job that you're doing full time, which is, again, it's not always the case with everybody, because a lot of times I see that RCICs, they change, they get the license, but their previous career, that's the job that they're still working. So we have, like software developers, we have marketing people, we have you're working completely different job. And then it's really hard, because your mind is already in your new business, but you still need that income.
Yeah.
So that's not exactly like your situation, because you are working in the same industry and you love your job, right? Which makes it no rush to,
exactly.
So which is great. That's the most important thing, is to just love what you do on a daily basis. So that's great.
I think I've found my calling, is what they say. And if you love your job, you haven't worked a day in your life. So
I love it. I'm so happy for you.
Yeah, I do love what I do. And I want to continue doing it for the foreseeable future. Despite the challenges and despite the negative, there's a negative feeling now about immigration and immigrants, and it seems to be cyclical, because it started, in 2013, it was like they changed in 2015, and now it's changing again in 2024, right? So if you're discouraged by what you see in the landscape, immigration is probably not the best business for you, because it's fluid. It changes so often, so frequently. You just have to be prepared. Like, I know so many people whose niche was international education, and once all these changes happened, they not only lost business, but they lost the will to pursue their dream and continue with the license. Some people are thinking of surrendering it, resigning.
Oh wow, really?
No, don't do that.
Wow.
This is immigration. It is alive. It is happening. It is not stagnant. Just don't put your focus in one area without understanding what's happening outside in the broader area. Look at Australia. Look at the United Kingdom. Look at New Zealand. Look at what they're doing, and know for sure that Canada is going to follow suit, right? So the what do they call them, the Five Eyes, right? These are the countries that communicate with each other, and some of the policies are similar. So if New Zealand is doing something and Australia is doing something, chances are Canada is going to be doing something. And this is what I mean by mapping out the what's happening in the wider community. Don't be so narrowly focused on international education as your thing. Open your mind, look around, see what's going on. Look at the war in Ukraine. I mean, nobody anticipated that several years ago. And now what's going on with Gaza and Israel, Sudan, Iran. I mean, it's all of these things impact immigration and your practice.
Yes, absolutely. And yes, it's immigration that is like fluid, right? It's continuously changing. But to be honest with you, it's just the premise of being a business owner is that the business, any business, it's always so dynamic, and it's always, ups and downs, and you just constantly need to adjust, and you constantly need to like assess your risks, mitigate what you can, right? So it's really well said. All right, so tell me, what would be your advice to any RCIC? What is your main advice that you can give to an RCIC?
Well, I think from my part, I'm a little philosophical, right? So, and I think a lot. I would advise any new RCIC that's coming into the business to understand why you're doing it. If you understand the why, then the how and the what will fall in place. But if you're doing this because a lot of people in my community are licensed immigration consultants, so let me do it as well. I walk in a plaza and there are like 15 immigration firms, so clearly immigration is a booming business, let me do it. If that's your mindset, then because most businesses, I think, fail within 3 years, if 2 to 3 years. So if you're not able to understand the why, when the ups and downs come, as you rightly say, you're going to be dissuaded, and you would have wasted all that money and all that time and effort. So understand the why. Why are you doing this, right? I would also recommend that there is a book that I read. It's pretty old, The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, that I believe guided me in how I interact with people, how I think about success, and how I organize myself, right? It was written by Stephen Covey, I believe, but there were sequences to that, but I've stuck to The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People as my go-to book. So if you can read as well, I know reading is not a big thing in this new age, but I still believe in it. If you want to be successful, because everything that you do now is going to have an effect later on. Yep. So there's nothing you don't know what the future holds, but if you, for example, decide to exercise now, for example, let's use a very simple example, then you know that in 6 months' time you're going to be fit to run the marathon or fit to go up the stairs. But you have to start doing something now. And so I think reading about business is very important, especially if you're not business minded, and knowing your why you're doing what you're doing.
Thank you so much, Howard. Yeah, I totally agree about reading, and I will definitely put that book on my list for my vacation. Definitely, because I've heard this somewhere that, reading a book, it's like getting a really, really cheap coaching, because you can get a book, for what, like $20 or something like that. But knowledge that you get from it, and there are a lot of like good business books, there are a lot of good, habit books and lifestyle books like that. You can get so much value out of it, and you can implement all of those things and strategies in your business, and it's like super valuable. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, and thank you for your time today. Thank you for attending this podcast. It was a pleasure.
Well, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about the business, because I think that we need to elevate the perception. The perception out there is still very low about as it relates to consultants like myself and you, other companies, and that's because, and I can't emphasize this enough, a lot of false information is out there, a lot of influencers out there. Everybody's talking about immigration. How do you do it? What do you do? And so when they make a mistake, you're the one that ends up trying to fix it. But even times before the mistake is made, they're comparing information that you're giving to them to what they're seeing on TikTok, to what they're seeing on YouTube, to what they're seeing on Instagram. And it can be so frustrating. So I appreciate the opportunity for a space like this to talk about legitimate issues, for the immigration landscape. And again, thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Howard. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much, and I'll see you soon. Thank you.
All right, you take care. Bye-bye.